So this is the second video on solving surd equations, and in these questions I'm going to have more than one surd. So you can see in my question I want to solve for x, which is an element of r, and over here I have got two surds floating around in that equation. And okay, I don't love that, but what I love even less is the fact that I've got two surds on the same side of the equation. So in any of these questions, if you see two surds, your first job is going to be to separate them to separate sides of the equation. So I'm going to take my root x and bring it across to the right-hand side. The reason that I'm doing this is that when I go to do my squaring step next, it's going to make life much easier if the two squares are separated. Okay, so I've squared both sides, and on the left-hand side, what that means is that I'll just have x plus 7 because the square root just goes. But on the right-hand side, it's a bit more complicated because I have to square this whole expression. So I'm going to have to multiply this expression by itself, which I can do out in full long way, or I can use my quick way of squaring, which is square the first term, double the product, and square the last. That's what I'm going to do. So when I square my first term, I'm going to get 49. When I double my product, I'm going to times 7 by minus root x. So that's minus 7 root x. I'm going to write that down there on the side so we can see it. And then I'm going to double that, which basically means double the coefficient. So that's going to be minus 14 root x. And then I'm going to square the last term. Now, it's a negative, but when I square it, it becomes positive. And when I square the square root x, it just becomes x. So I end up with positive x. Now, at this point, I notice I still have a square root in my equation. Okay, so my goal is to get rid of my square roots. So there's going to be another step indeed to go on and sort this out. And to be able to do that, I'm going to try and isolate that surd, okay? Now, you can leave it where it is on this right-hand side if you like. I'm going to actually bring it over to the left-hand side, and then at least it'll be a positive 14 root x. And I'll bring everything else over to the right-hand side. Okay, so now what I want to do is just tidy up on the right, and that tidies up very easily to give me 42. And now I'm going to square both sides. When I square both sides, just be careful squaring here on the left-hand side, because since these two are multiplying, I should square them both. So I should square 14, and that'll give me 196, and I should square root x, and that's going to give me x. So I've distributed the power over the multiplication, and then I'm going to square square 42. And then one last step is just to get x by itself. And so my solution is 9. Now, I only have one solution, so it's fair enough to assume this is probably okay, but I should still really verify because I am dealing with surd equations. When I go to verify, I'm going to go back to my very first line of the question and just sub that 9 in for every x I see. And then I'll stick the left-hand side into the calculator and just see what I get. And I get 7 equals 7, and I'm happy with that. And I'll just state at the end that x equals 9 is in fact the solution. I'm going to do a second example now. And again, I've got two surds. And if you think you know what the first step is, pause the video here and give it a shot. And of course, it's going to be to separate the surds to separate sides of the equation. So I'm just going to bring the root 2 minus x across to the right-hand side out of the way, and then I can go ahead with my squaring as usual. Again, when I go to do my squaring, I can use my quick way of squaring. And just be careful as we do this on the left-hand side, because I've got a fairly chunky bracket going on here. So now, when I talk about my first term here, this surd, this root, I think of this as being all effectively one term, really. It's all kind of stuck together by the root. So when I say square the first, what I really mean is square that square root. So that just basically means that I am going to just get rid of the square root off that. And then I want double the product. So I want to multiply that root by minus 1 and then double the product. But I'm going to keep my root in this case. So when I multiply these two together, I get minus 1 by the square root of 3x plus 1. And then I want to times that by 2, which basically means I should multiply this guy by 2. So I end up with minus 2 root 3x plus 1. And then I want to square my last. So again, just watch out, because if I'm squaring that, a minus by a minus will be a plus. That's my left-hand side squared out. The right-hand side is easier because I'm just squaring a square root. So the right is just 2 minus x. Now, I've still got the square root floating around in here. Okay, so I need to move that to one side by itself, and then I need to square again. Again, because this guy is negative, it'll probably make my life a little bit easier if I move him over to the right-hand side and make him positive, but I can leave him where he is if I want to. But I'm deciding to bring him over to the right. So I've brought everything else over to the left, and he's gone to the right. And now I'm going to tidy up the left-hand side, and then I'm going to square again. And when I square now this time, I'm going to square my left-hand side, so I'll square the 4 and square the x. That's nice and straightforward because nothing's adding or subtracting. And then the same thing on the right-hand side. I'm going to distribute my square over the multiplication, so I'll square the 2 and I'll square the square root. And then I think this is beginning to look a bit like a quadratic, so I'm going to tidy it up and get it all on one side. So, okay, everything over to the left. And now I want to solve this, and probably not a bad plan to divide across by 4 first, or if you prefer, use the minus b formula, either is fine. So there's my quadratic, and there are my factors. So my two potential solutions are x equals minus a quarter and x equals 1, and now I need to verify those to check and see if one or both are okay. So I'll just sub straight into the original line, and then I'll stick the left-hand side into the calculator and see does it make 0 like it's supposed to. And that comes out as minus 2, which is clearly not equal to 0, so I won't be accepting that solution. Now I'll try for x equals 1, and this time I get 0 equals 0, which is absolutely fine. So I'll wrap up then by just pointing out what's an acceptable solution and what's not. So there we go, x equals minus a quarter, not a solution, x equals 1 is a solution. Okay, so here is a question now for you to do yourself. So pause the video here, give it a shot, and then play and see if you're correct. If you get stuck at any stage, just hit play for a little bit until you're over the hump. Okay, so here's my solution. First thing there that I'm doing so is separating my thirds, and then I'm going to square to try and eliminate. So again, square the first, double the product, square the last. Remember that I'm doing that when I've got addition between two terms in a bracket being squared. So when I square the first bit, that's square root, I get 5x minus 1. Double the product, times the root by 2, and then times it by 2 again, so that's 4 root 5x minus 1. And square the last, square that 2 at the end. And then on the right hand side, I'm just squaring a square root, so no messing around, it's just straight to the 10x plus 5. And now I can still see, okay, I've got this surd still lurking around. I need to isolate that so by itself, and it's positive where it is, so I'll leave it on that side of the equation, and then I'll bring everything else across to the right hand side, and I'll just tidy up then a bit on the right. So I've got that done, and then I want to square again, so to get rid of that square root, because I don't want that in my equation. And on the left hand side, I need to distribute the square to both parts of the product. So I want to square the 4 and square the square root. And on the right hand side, I have to go through my square the first, double the product, square the last, because these two terms are adding or subtracting. So I'm going to say 25x squared plus 20x plus 4. Yeah, I can kind of see that it's turning into a quadratic, so I want to multiply out here on the left hand side and then get it all on one side. So I've multiplied out all over to one side, tidy it up, probably divide across here by 5 to make things a bit easier for myself, or if you prefer, use the minus b, and now factorize. So there are my factors, and my two possible solutions are 2/5 and 2, but I need to go and check those to see if they're actually okay. So I'll take the 2/5 first, and then off to the calculator, and happy out, that comes out as 0 equals 0, so I can accept that. And what about x equals 2? In it goes, and again 0 equals 0, so it's all good. And this is a case where both solutions are actually fine to accept. That can happen. Again, it's important to verify, because you never quite know whether or not both are acceptable or only one is. So the verification step is very important. And then I'll just wrap up by noting that each of those is an acceptable solution. Job done.